When we think about ancient Rome, images of mighty emperors, huge palaces, and fearless gladiators often dominate our thoughts. This timeless civilization, known for its unparalleled advancements and conquests, was an epitome of glory in the ancient world. However, just beneath the grandeur of its polished marble and towering buildings lies a concealed narrative. A dark tale echoing the cries of countless souls who built this empire yet remain shackled in chains. By the 1st century BC, an astonishing one-third of Rome's population were slaves. This wasn't a minor detail. It was central to Rome's socio-economic backbone. The massive slave population came mainly from Rome's conquests, spanning Europe, Asia, and Africa. These slaves weren't just laborers, they were also teachers, doctors, and entertainers. Their roles varied widely. A household slave might have decent living conditions, while a miner faced hardship and a short life. Yet universally, they were viewed as property. Slavery was deeply embedded in Roman society, shaping its wealth and culture. But in this prosperity, the individual stories and struggles of the slaves are often overshadowed. Building on the overwhelming prevalence of slaves, it's heart-wrenching to understand the horrors they faced daily. One of the most feared punishments was crucifixion. While we often associate it with religious tales, it was primarily a tool for public humiliation and deterrence. Slaves were nailed or tied to wooden crosses and left to suffer an agonizing death exposed to the elements. This wasn't just about ending a life, it was a prolonged public display. A message to other slaves: step out of line, and this could be you. Then there was the daily terror of physical abuse. Whippings and beatings were commonplace for minor transgressions, were sometimes just at their master's whim. A slave could be thrashed with implements designed to inflict maximum pain. These weren't just punishments, they were statements of power and control, meant to remind slaves of their place. At the very bottom of Roman society, but perhaps the most chilling form of brutality was the arena. Slaves, especially those deemed defiant or expendable, were thrown into these amphitheaters before cheering crowds. They'd fight to the death or face wild beasts, all in the name of entertainment. These weren't quick deaths, they were drawn-out, violent spectacles. Thus, the life of a Roman slave wasn't just hard work and servitude. It was living under the constant shadow of extreme violence, knowing that any day could bring a fate worse than death. Moving on from the chilling accounts of arena brutality, we find that many Roman slaves didn't face an audience when they suffered. Instead, their pain was hidden in the mines, farms, and galleys, where they were subjected to back-breaking work day in and day out. In these environments, the life of a slave was both exhausting and tragically short. Let's first look into the mines. Here, slaves worked in dark, cramped conditions, chiseling out precious metals and stones for their masters. The air was thick with dust, leading to respiratory diseases. Cave-ins and accidents were common. In the mines of Spain, for instance, a slave might only survive a few months to a year, their life expectancy cut brutally short by the toxic environment and continuous work pace. On the farms, the scenario was slightly different, but no less tiring. Slaves worked hard under the scorching sun, planting and harvesting crops, tending to animals, and performing other never-ending chores. From dawn to dusk, their hands became calloused, their backs bent, and their spirits crushed. In some large estates, it wasn't uncommon to find slaves chained to their work tools to prevent any thought of escape. The galleys or ships paint another grim picture. Slaves here were often chained to their oars, rowing massive vessels through storm and calm. They worked in tight spaces with little air or light, their lives dictated by the rhythm of the drumbeat. Their skin bore the burden of salty sea winds, and their muscles ached constantly. When a ship sank in battle or during a storm, these oar-bound slaves usually went down with it, their chains becoming their watery grave's final embrace. Moving from the fields and galleys, there's another haunting side of Roman slavery. Many slaves were not just valued for their manual labor, but for their ability to entertain and satisfy the desires of their masters. It's crucial to unveil this dark aspect of Roman society. The arenas, while glorified in many records, were sites of immense suffering for the gladiators, most of whom were slaves trained to fight to the death. These men and sometimes women were made to spill blood for sport. While some might argue that the roar of the crowd gave them a sense of purpose or fame, for many it was a life of fear, never knowing if today's battle would be their last. Then there was the realm of personal entertainment. Slaves danced, sang, and performed as per the order of their masters, often subjected to ridicule or scorn. Their artistic talents, instead of being a source of pride, became yet another tool for their exploitation. Darker still was the world of sexual slavery. Many slaves, both male and female, were bought purely for their owner's sexual gratification. The tragedy of this exploitation isn't just in the act, but in the complete denial of these slaves' autonomy and consent. Furthermore, some slaves were even bred like livestock to produce a new generation of slaves, ensuring a continuous supply for their masters. Prostitution, another grim reality, saw countless slaves pushed into brothels, servicing numerous clients every day. The streets of ancient Rome were lined with such establishments, revealing the dark and bleak image of ancient Rome, often hidden behind its grandeur. Another bitter reality for the slaves in ancient Rome was that of discrimination and derogation they had to endure. It wasn't merely physical labor or exploitation, it was a systemic stripping away of dignity. A slave's day ended at the will of their master, their identity stripped away. They became a mere possession, an object to be used, abused, and discarded without a second thought. Imagine a society where your existence, your pain, your voice went unseen and unheard, where your name was erased and replaced with the label of slave or property. Accounts from slaves like Felix, who served in a wealthy Roman household, help us sketch the grim picture of daily humiliations. Felix writes of being awakened at all hours, of having no say over his body, his time, or his desires. His life, as he portrays it, was a constant barrage of orders, with punishments given out for the slightest mistakes or delays. In the vast social divide of ancient Rome, where luxurious villas and lavish feasts painted the lives of the elite, slaves were reduced to nothingness. Even if a slave was fortunate enough to be in a respectable position, such as a teacher or doctor, they were never truly seen as equals to Romans. Their intellect, skills, and contributions were overshadowed by their enslaved status. The social perception bore a stark contrast to the intimate dependence the masters had on their slaves. While they leaned heavily on their service, in public and societal norms, slaves were derogated and humiliated. They were often made to wear distinguishable clothing and were forbidden from enjoying the common rights and luxuries of a free Roman. This discrimination was not just an unspoken reality, it was set out in Roman laws and norms, ensuring that slaves knew their place. Slaves were forbidden from participating in political life, from bearing arms, and from enjoying festivals and public events unless they were serving their masters. The oppressive chains that bound Roman slaves weren't just physical. They were firmly rooted in the profound fear that gripped the hearts of Roman masters. The thought of a slave uprising was terrifying to the Roman elite, who were vastly outnumbered. To maintain their strong grip on power, they implemented brutal preventative measures, ensuring that the slaves' spirits were as shackled as their bodies. One cannot discuss this fear without mentioning the most infamous slave rebellion in Roman history, the Spartacus-led revolt between 73 to 71 BC. Spartacus, once a gladiator, rose to lead an army of escaped slaves against the Roman Republic. The rebellion grew in magnitude, with sources suggesting that at its peak, Spartacus commanded an army of around 120,000 rebels. The rebellion highlighted the rising discontent among the slaves. Accounts from slaves of the time like Lucius depict a world where even the whisper of disobedience was met with harsh penalties. Lucius often recounted the night raids, where Roman soldiers would storm slave quarters, searching for any signs of revolt. There were punishments, sometimes death, for those even suspected of plotting against their masters. The message was clear: defiance would not be tolerated. Even in the rare moments where they were set free, freedom proved unachievable for many Roman slaves. Take the case of Gaius, a slave who was granted his freedom as a reward for his service. While no longer a slave, Gaius found himself in a society that still didn't accept him. He may have been free, but the brand of former slave forever scarred his status, limiting his rights and social mobility. Stories like Gaius's are not uncommon. Slaves who managed to buy their freedom or were freed by their masters still found themselves as outcasts in Roman society. They couldn't hold certain offices or marry into particular classes. Their so-called freedom was but a mask, a diluted version of the liberty enjoyed by true Romans. Hidden behind Rome's grandeur lay tales of oppression, rebellion, and elusive freedom. But as we reflect on these stories, we must ask, do the echoes of this ancient injustice still resonate in the modern world? This is History Uncharted. See you next time.